faith that he had in his beliefs was rivaled only by the faith he had in his troops.
Fate of the war hinges on this. All the pieces of the jigsaw are in place. There's only one imponderable that remains. I need a forecast.
I'm concerned that what you're asking me is scientifically impossible, sir. Long-term forecasting is really only ever educated guesswork.
Monday is not long-term.
That was a scene from the film Pressure. The story follows the tense 72 hours before the largest invasion in military history, D-Day. And General Dwight D. Eisenhower and Captain James Stagg face an impossible decision. I talked with the actors and director of the film. We start with Brendan Fraser, who plays the role of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. So you played General Dwight D. Eisenhower in this film. What would you say was the greatest pressure of playing him?
Well, certainly the history of who he was, and bringing that to the fore for one fateful weekend before the deployment of 300,000 troops in the face of inclement weather. I guess the pressure was to make sure that I had a working knowledge of his history, that he did graduate West Point with aspirations to fight in the First World War, felt disappointed that it had concluded before he could. He was a soldier who lived the next 40 years never having fired a shot in anger or was fired at in anger. He was consistently promoted as an excellent strategist, as a diplomat, and for showing excellent leadership skills. And what does it mean to have that? I think the pressure was that I needed to be like Ike. I had to listen and not just hear people and gain everyone's opinion and then take responsibility for the decisions to be made and stand by them. I grew to admire him as a historical figure.
How would you describe those 72 hours? I saw the quote where he said, "We had better meteorologists," but how would you describe those final 72 hours?
They had to have been fraught with not just hand-wringing and chain cigarette smoking and coffee quaffing and sweating and raised voices and prayer and disillusionment and sleeplessness. And one can only imagine what that was like, which is what we've done, is give the audience an imagining of what those conversations be with the full knowledge of history as we have it. And to put the two together and tell a story that is in our cultural groundwater pretty well known, but for one small fact that we weren't aware that the attack was meant to be for a Monday and it needed to be delayed to the Tuesday because bad weather was rolling in. And up until then, meteorology was largely looking out the window. And relying on analog reports and saying, hey, it didn't rain or snow in 1888 on this day, so we'll be fine. And reconciling that and the collision of ideologies, rely on science and fact, or go with what is staid and true, and the seemingly garden variety pleasantness that we have about weather today, and apply that to the circumstances of the world events underway at that time, really show us that, as a personal view, as a species, there's something to be said if we shake our fist at the sky and say, I don't like what you're doing right now, because as we all know, Mother Nature does not give a flying leap what we think or feel. It's the way you... And this is an example of that. And it changed the course of our history.
Absolutely.
By someone who had to make a decision about if or not to delay. And what was on his mind? Well, I did learn that he had written a letter in the event of victory. He had written a letter in the event of defeat. We know the one in the event of victory because he prevailed. But he did take responsibility. I know that he cared intensely for the troops. It's not a stretch of logic to think that he saw them as his own sons. He and I are similar in age at the time when he was a four-star general on that fateful weekend. Now, and I certainly look at 19, 20, 21-year-old guys, my own sons, and I shudder to think of the circumstances that, and Ike Eisenhower did the very same thing with the grim statistic, knowing what the survival rate would have had been. I guess make a movie about it.
One of the most beautiful scenes is the scene before the storm, if you will. They're in church and the voices of the men singing. How important and integral would you say faith was to this mission?
He was a man of faith, that's for sure. And I know that it wasn't just the ritual of going to church and prayer. It was knowing that he knew that we're fallible as humans. We are. We do shake our fist at the sky and wonder why. And he did know that we can only keep trying, and what we must do is believe in one another. And if I am to suppose an accurate answer, it would be that the faith that he had in his beliefs was rivaled only by the faith he had in his troops. And each can win and can lose. But he stood by what it meant to be the one to have to make those decisions.
What was your first connection to this story? Do you remember when you first read, first saw? What was your first connection?
I was unaware that there was a delay from Monday to Tuesday, for reasons being that the weather was off. And I was not appreciative of what that meant. You can't just turn around 300,000 men. You can't just delay for 2 weeks and wait for the tide to change to the way that you like it to be without indicating to the enemy that you've just shown your cards. I knew none of this. Of course, they came with research and with reading the script and doing my job, which I was happy to. And I did grow to admire him. He was a product of his time. But I did grow to admire that he was an individual who listened to everyone, didn't just hear them. And he took responsibility. He was the supreme commander of the Allied forces. And that was fraught in its own way, considering that, yes, there were opposing forces from within the same house who wanted to be in charge, and who was the one to take responsibility for what was absolutely part of the equation. But in the end, I think it was down to perseverance and faith. And honestly, this film exists as a testament now to remind us not only what was at stake at that time, but remind us what leadership looked like then and the reason why we went to war at all in the first place.
Our special conversations with the cast of Pressure continue with my one-on-one with actor Andrew Scott. He plays the role of Captain James Stagg. So you played James Stagg in this film. For many, this is going to be an introduction to this man. Who is he?
Well, Group Captain James Stagg was the chief meteorological officer, and he was asked to give advice on what way he felt the forecast was going to be before the D-Day landings. And he was pressurized to give a particular forecast. And he had a forecast. And that was the one that he believed, based on the data that he collected, was going to be the most accurate one. And he wasn't going to move away from that, even though they had a date in mind. And listening to his forecast would have mean changing that date. And he refused to renege on what he believed was the correct forecast. So it's about the weather in some ways, but it's also about integrity and humility in some ways, because no matter how much power or control we believe we have, we are all at the mercy of nature and the weather.
Where do you think that integrity and fortitude for him came from in terms of your study about him? Where do you think that came from?
I think he was a really humble person. And I think he had great passion for his subject, you know. And so he didn't really need to be the big I am, you know. He didn't need to be, he had a great expertise and a great respect for all the work. He was pretty formidable as a person. And I think that's where it comes from. That just a real interest in, you know, it's amazing to me that people are born and they have a kind of fascination with a subject, and it becomes their life's work. And everybody has you know, different passions, and that was his.
How would you describe those 72 hours leading up to D-Day, having now played this role?
Well, I wouldn't begin to understand what it was really like for the people and the enormous stakes. But what I think is so notable about all the characters, not just James Stagg, but all the people who were involved in making that decision, was again, that word, the humility of it and the responsibility and the sense of duty. What is the right thing to do? Who are delegating expertise, listening. That's a huge one. That's what I think the power in the Eisenhower portrayal, as portrayed by Brendan Fraser, is that he's somebody who is very powerful and the decision is his, but he's able to listen to other people, and that's very, very important, I think, for our people in power. Any person in power is to be able to go, yeah, but what do you think? Not just listen to me, but, you know, listen to other people.
How familiar were you with this story before?
Not at all. Not at all. No, I didn't know the story, and it blows my mind a little bit because, of course, it would be a huge consideration, you know, the weather. But it makes it a really interesting thing to talk about because people are surprised, like, hey, this movie's about the weather. Okay, right. But yeah, it's like the weather it's part of our everyday life for every person. So yeah, it's good. It connects people. For sure.
Is there anything that sealed the deal that made you say, I want to do this?
The script was really, really beautifully written, and the fact that it was kind of witty in places as well. It's not just all very, very serious. The dialogue was kind of wonderful, and I loved Anthony's films before, and of course our incredible cast: Damian Lewis and Kerry Condon and Chris Messina, and of course Mr. Fraser. Yeah.
Our podcast conversations continue now with Kerry Condon. She plays the role of Kay Summersby.
So you play Captain Kay Summersby. For many, this is going to be an introduction. Who is she?
She's Lieutenant Kay Summersby.
Okay.
She's the Lieutenant Kay Summersby. And she was, when the movie starts, she's been Eisenhower's driver for like 3 years and has sort of progressed to be his executive aide. So basically she's like his secretary, his right-hand woman. She kind of does everything, and also like his confidant. And this is, the movie starts when D-Day is going to happen in 3 days, and they bring in this meteorologist to try and predict, is this a good idea? What's the weather looking like? Are we good to go? And that's where the movie starts.
How would you describe the relationship between her and Eisenhower?
Well, I think like as a worker, she was very diligent and she was very good at her job. So she was sort of respected by all the other generals and everyone else there. And then I think they also respected her because they knew that Eisenhower needed her. Like she was there for him when he was struggling with this decision and struggling with this war and this guilt over what had happened prior with Operation Tiger and how badly it had went. So I think that, and then behind closed doors, he also was very honest with her and very vulnerable. Yeah.
What was the pressure for you being almost the only female voice in this film, if you will?
I don't think I felt pressure because Kay sort of knew her place and I knew my place within the story. But she did kind of know her place, and it was to do her job properly and to not, show any signs of stress and remain calm and help these people make the right decisions. So yeah, I tried to stay like Kay, just calm,
A strong woman, though, reading just the things that she endured and saw,
Yes.
even leading up to.
Yeah, before she worked for Eisenhower, she was like an ambulance driver during the Blitz, which was fascinating to me also, because that's a level of skill, you know, to be that an ambulance driver. Even to this day, it still is quite a skill. So yeah, she was sort of ahead of her time, so married to her job, and yeah, that she had such an influence over such a powerful person.
What attracted you to this story? I think it's a story many people are going to watch and be surprised. Like, I had no clue that this is what happened 72 hours before.
Yeah, the same as me. I had no idea this happened. I had no idea this one person. Everything could have been different in our lives had this not worked out. And just, it also made me think about, like, you know, that we talk about stress in our own life, driving home in traffic. And you're like, can you imagine the stress of thousands of people dying, and it could be your fault because you did your job wrong? It just you know, really made me think about that. And also the just D-Day itself, you know, just like all the sacrifices and the lives that were made for us to be here now and have the privileges that we have now. It just was very moving seeing the real footage and those real soldiers that's in the movie.
What do you think of the timing of this? This comes out at a time where America is celebrating 250 years of existence, and now we're going to get this piece of our history to look
I know, 250 years seems so young.
I know.
Though, doesn't it? Like little baby America.
Yes.
Right?
Indeed.
It's nothing. Just fascinating, and people working together, you know, and then just the tragedy of war too, and maybe we can just reflect on that and just, like, you know, it's never a good outcome, you know, no matter what the case. But yeah, just standing up for what you believe is right, even if you're like intimidated or outnumbered or, you know, feel inferior. Just how important it is to be courageous when you believe something is correct.
Our conversation now moves from the cast to the crew and director Anthony Morris.
So, as the director of Pressure, what was the greatest pressure of bringing this film to the screen?
There were many and varied. Without wanting to sound cliche, the weather itself was a big factor for us. We shot the film in England in fall, going into winter, and the film rests on most of the film having sunny weather. And if you've ever been to England, you can't even bet on it, you know, in the middle of summer, let alone when we shot it. I'll never forget in the week leading up to D-Day, where we're going to shoot our big battle scenes, a lot of our production resources were tied up in that. We got a series of weather reports on the Wednesday before the Monday that we were meant to shoot, that it was going to be a washout. There was going to be 50-knot waves, and there was going to be 50-knot winds and 6-foot waves and all this sort of stuff. On the Monday, it was a washout. We delayed by a day. And then on the Tuesday, the break came, the good weather came in, and we filmed the next 4 days, and it was literally art imitating life, imitating art. It was incredible.
Wow. How would you describe this story? It's going to be so new to so many people.
You know, I think, it's definitely this film's many things. It's a meditation on leadership. It's about how you bring your best self to the table when all the chips are down. But more than anything, what intrigued me about it, why I wanted to do the film, was it's this story about one big decision that has to be made. And the people that are tasked with making this decision are some of the era's most formidable generals and soldiers and scientists. They've all got very different ideas as to when and whether they should send off the largest army in history across an ocean to go and invade another country. And they don't know what to do, because many of them want to go, but then you got one guy who's saying it will lead to disaster. And watching these people slowly go crazy over 3 days, not knowing which way to turn, there's some inherent drama in that I was very interested in exploring. And so, you know, it's a film about leadership, it's a film about war, it's a film about science, but more than anything, you know, I think it's a film about, you know, when we got really tough decisions that we got to make, how do we bring our best selves to the table to make them? So.
And there's something you have absolutely positively no control over.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah. Well, the weather's, it's invisible. so the weather's invisible. Nature itself, we don't even realize, how much of an effect it has in our lives. We're kind of disconnected from it a little bit in the modern world. But Stagg, our protagonist, is very keenly aware of this, and he's the canary in the coal mine. He's telling people, listen, you do the wrong thing, you're going to die. And there's a lot to that.
What are your thoughts on casting? It seemed perfect in every role. Describe that process for me. And
look, it was different with every actor. With Andrew Scott, we were just blessed with an actor who can do very little, or seemingly be doing very little on screen, and you can't look away. There's so much going on under the surface, and for a character who a lot of his conflict is internal, he wants to say this stuff. He wants to warn people of what's going to happen, but he knows they don't want to hear it. And so a lot of his sort of gruff exterior, his frustration, comes from him knowing what the right thing is, but knowing no one kind of will believe him. And it's a very delicate performance. It's something where there's layers of humanity buried beneath this gruff exterior. His character isn't necessarily likable to begin with, but you get a sense that this guy's a rock and nothing is going to faze him. Eisenhower is a very different depiction as to how we commonly know Eisenhower, the president. This is Eisenhower, the general. This is the guy that was smoking 4 to 6 packets of cigarettes a day, who was drinking 20 cups of coffee a day, whose body was breaking down. And we wanted to show the man behind the myth. We wanted to show behind the closed doors, what were his fears? What were his vulnerabilities? What's it like to have the lives of hundreds of thousands or even millions of men on your shoulders? And the decision that you make will determine their fate. We needed an actor in Brendan, we found that. We found someone who's had the courage to access that humanity and that vulnerability. So.
And then Captain K.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear that, man.
Captain K.
Yes. Sorry, yes. Kay Summersby. So she was a fascinating character. The real-life Kay Summersby was driving ambulances full of dead bodies during the Blitz. She had a story once that the morgue was so full that they had to go and put them in a cinema. And she wrote in her memoirs about looking at the front row of headless corpses. When you've got a woman who's been through stuff like that, who was a widow whose husband was killed in war, when she's walking into these rooms, she's not afraid of anybody. And she was someone who Eisenhower, in real life, built a really strong rapport with, who he could trust. She wasn't a careerist. She wasn't someone necessarily trying to, work her way up the military establishment. And so she was someone Eisenhower could confide in. And for us as filmmakers, as screenwriters, it was a really important relationship to get to the inner psychology of Ike and what was going on in his head behind the facade that he had to put up amongst all the different men that were around him.
No. This film is released as America celebrates a major anniversary. How special and significant is that for you?
Look, it's hugely significant because this film is, enmeshed in the cultural memory of our country and of the country I come from as well. In Australia, England, many allied nations worked together in order for D-Day to be a success. In fact, at the 75th anniversary of D-Day, there was a huge event that was held at Suffolk House, the real-life place where this happened, and you had the world leaders of all the allied nations, Queen of England, presidents, prime ministers, all attend, and they actually saw some scenes from Pressure that was performed at the time.
Oh, wow.
And, your audience can go and look that up. And, I hope that our film has the same resonance as the play managed to have for its audience.
I love the film. Looking back, I'm curious, what ended up on the cutting floor that you just had a hard time parting with?
To be honest, not much. I wrote the film with David Haig. I think I directed it in my head 50 times before we ever turned the cameras on. And to be honest, the edit was just a natural evolution of that. There weren't major changes or anything like that. It was paring things down here and there, but it was very much a natural evolution of the process. And, it took time to edit it because we're also incorporating real-life archival footage into the material. And so audiences will kind of get a front row seat of not just what we recreated, but what we enmeshed with real-life images of thousands of soldiers, storming the beaches of D-Day and the lead up to it. And so, I was proud of how all that worked out, to be honest.
Pressure is in theaters nationwide right now. We thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Conversations from Studio 5 and making us your weekly destination for uplifting interviews with a strong focus on faith. For more on Studio 5, the interviews, and our lifestyle entertainment world, be sure to check out our YouTube page. You can do that simply by searching Studio 5 with Efrem Graham. Hope you'll join us again right here next time on the podcast. Bye-bye. Studio 5 is expanding on YouTube, and you can help us to grow the platform by subscribing. Simply search Studio 5 with Efrem Graham. There you will discover the latest in uplifting entertainment, exclusive first looks on the latest films, music, and lifestyle content, plus one-on-one interviews with some of your favorite actors and recording artists. Simply search Studio 5 with Efrem Graham on YouTube. Please do it today.